we're going to roll into our last session here, guys, and hopefully towards the end we'll have some time to tell you what an honor it's been to be up here, and what a pleasure it's been, and watching people that are engaged in this process. And because don't get the idea that we are spiritual giants, or that we're thinking, I'm telling you, we are two people that are trying our best to work an AA program, and trying to take it from being meeting makers into being people that are actually working a 12-step program in our lives has been the most amazing thing in our lives. And I work a lot. I seem to work a lot with guys that the way when I do a 1-hour talk at a conference or something, it's both of us talk a lot about untreated alcoholism and about people that I always say that I feel like there's plenty of the message of the hope of recovery for the new man. And I'm all about the new guy coming into AA. It's the lifeblood of our fellowship. But I'm also very aware of the people that have been in the rooms for a while and are dying on the vine. Not everybody dying of untreated alcoholism is a newcomer to this fellowship, because I was one of them at 17 years sober. And that's what we were just talking about during the break, is that with this self-will thing, I hit the wall at 4.5 years. I blew up a marriage. I was constantly overdrawn at the bank. I was self-employed. It was a massive level of stress, and then it says on the next occasion he tries harder. He decides to exert himself more, right? So I pulled back and I licked my wounds for a little while, and I got into another relationship, and I ran at that with self-will. And 2.5 years after that, I had blown up that marriage, and I'm still having troubles at the bank. And what the problem was, I didn't know what the problem was, and my sponsor at the time didn't know what the problem was, and it wasn't because he was holding back anything from me. He was operating on the best information he had, but I didn't have anybody that was telling me, Charlie, what you're running up against is the failure of self-will. In step 3, it says the first requirement is that I be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Dude, on that basis, you're going to be in constant collision with something or somebody, even though your motives are good. So what happened was, rather than have that second surrender that we talk about, it's because a lot of us, man, to hit that second surrender, I got to be bloodied in sobriety. I got to I got to get to the point where I go, okay, all right, I understand. I finally admit that on my will, this is going to be a struggle, because I'm a pretty smart guy, and I'm pretty, and I've been self-employed my whole life, and, all this thing, but this deal is cratering on me, But so what happened was, rather than take that second surrender to self, I pulled back and retreated more into self. I thought, what? Keep it. I've been doing your AA deal for 7 years, and I'm getting my brains beat out every time I step into the ring, and every time I step into the ring, I get knocked to the mat. So I'm gonna get mine. I got this deal, and the next 10 years was disastrous. To say that I didn't drink, but this was not a CD or a DVD you'd want sent into the GSO to have a look at, So when I hit that bottom with that, and as we see it all the time, it is so much the struggle, and it's so much of it that we miss. And if we're just doing meeting-based sobriety, we can be walking around in massive untreated alcoholism. And, I'm going to finish with, I did a men's retreat out, and we were just talking about this during the break. I'm going to go, and I haven't said it from the microphone this time, but I did a men's retreat out in Idaho. And the guy that hosted us he was about my age, and he'd blown up a few marriages, and he kept trying, he'd been trying to be in and out of AA for 18, 20 years, right? And I think he had a year and a half at the time he was picking us up, and his sponsor's with us, and we're getting ready to grill steaks and have lunch, and then we're going up to this men's retreat in Lava Springs. And we're talking like we do, when we sit around and we're talking, and this guy's talking about, this first marriage, my first wife, she was crazy as hell, and then my second wife, now that one was crazy, and then now my third wife, now she was really crazy, does that sound familiar? Does that sound like the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous? And I go, how is it you keep finding yourself in a relationship with crazy women? And he's like, what? And I had a sponsee with me. He told me later, he goes, Charlie, we'd only been there about an hour when you dropped this one on him, and I was like, ooh. But I said, well, tell me. I said, this fact-finding and fact-facing mission, I said, these women that you were married to, I said, were they crazy when you started dating them? I mean, why would you start dating a crazy woman? It seems like you'd run for the nearest exit. He's like, well, no, I mean, they weren't really that crazy, I guess when I first, I said, is it possible that the difference between the way they were when you met them and this crazy person that you got a divorce from, is it possible that the only difference between the way they were when you met them and the way they were when you divorced them was the effects of spending that period of time with your level of self-centeredness? And his sponsor goes, say that again. When we say I'd rather step on your toes than stand on your grave, when you get into this work, you start seeing that it's not a mistake that this guy keeps relapsing for a while, because we try to come into the rooms and we try to do the deal. We think doing the AA thing is going to the meetings and not drinking and hanging out with the AA people. And there is a level of the deal that I have never experienced. I usually talk about the Dallas Cowboy games. I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan. I assume we all are, right? No, I'm kidding. I like to say that. I love to say that in areas of the country where it gets a big reaction, But I've been going to these games, forever. And one day this sponsee of mine goes, he says, my family's got a skybox at Texas Stadium. I went, really? And he calls me up in September and he goes, do you want to go to the Philadelphia game in our skybox? And I was like, absolutely, And so I meet him up in Dallas, and we go over to his uncle's house, and we all go to Texas Stadium, where we park in this private little parking area, and we go in this nice, quiet little entrance, and we go up our own little escalator, not with the hoi polloi, it's just, we were going up there, and you enter into this quiet little hallway, and there's waiters walking around, and they're bringing cookies and ice and stuff like this, and I'm looking around, and I'm going, I don't know whether to be thrilled to be here or to be pissed because I've been sitting in the cheap seats for 20 years, But that was my experience in AA after 17 years, was it turned out there was a level of the deal going on that I had never experienced. I thought I was in AA. If I died in that plane crash, and I haven't even told the story of the plane crash, but a lot of the beginning of my spiritual awakening was a plane crash in 2003 out in eastern Long Island. We crashed into the water at night, and we're on CNN and all this stuff. But, it was the beginning of a spiritual awakening for me. But the point of the story is, if I had died in that plane crash, I would have missed it. I'd have missed the whole deal. I would have spent 17 years in Alcoholics Anonymous thinking I knew what AA had to offer for me when I had never dipped a toe in the water. The reason we do these conferences is because the experience we had after getting with Mark and some of these guys that were really serious about this common solution. The book says we have a common solution, a way out upon which we can absolutely agree, upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book brings to the suffering alcoholic. But we'll come to a 12-step program and not do the 12 steps. I come to the 12-step program. It'd be like, I got diabetes. Really? Yeah. Have you been to? I don't have diabetes. A little gout maybe, but imagine a guy that's got diabetes, and you go, really? How long you had it? You go, oh, pretty good while. I've been in and out of the hospital for the last 18 years. Really? Are you doing the insulin? He's like, No, but I go to some insulin meetings, with some guys, and once or twice a year I'll even go to an insulin retreat, but what happens at these deals is we'll get right up next to the solution, and I'll take some comfort from knowing that the solution is there, and I'm around people that are in the solution. But this is a program of action. It says faith without works is dead. Self-knowledge will not keep a guy like me sober. And I was telling John during the break of John, Jeff, and Keith that I don't work a program these days because I'm afraid that vodka is going to jump down my throat. I am scared to death of the bedevilments on page 52 because I am a walking testimony that it is available in sobriety. If I get blocked, those bedevilments on page 52 are available to me at, well into sobriety. And when it talks about, we were having trouble with our personal relationships. I couldn't control my emotional nature. I was a prey to misery and depression. I couldn't make a living. That's the one I used to hang my hat on. I was like, by God, I can make a living. And then one day somebody goes, are you happy in your work? I was like, oh, so I get a 0. Okay, we had a feeling of uselessness. How many times, has there been a time in sobriety? I know for me, some of the people that have got 10, 15, 20, 25, I know there have been times in my sobriety where if a brand new guy had walked up to me and said, I don't know what to do, can you put me through the work? I'd had nothing. I had almost nothing for him. Slogan slinging, and try to go to a bunch of meetings and take this book and read, just read the whole damn thing, and there's a part of me inside that is hoping that they will find another sponsor, because at some level I know I ain't got what they need, and to come from that place and to be engaged in this work and to have the feeling that when a new guy comes up to you and says, can you put me through the work, to be able to go, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you got a big book? Let's sit down. If you don't have a big book, I'll buy you one, and we're going to sit down here and we're going to talk about the problem, we're going to talk about the solution, and we're going to lay out the program of action. We're going to get you writing the inventory. We're going to do a 4-column inventory. I'm going to hammer your butt in the 4th column, and then we're going to roll into 6 and 7. We're going to get you out there making amends and get you involved in the disciplines of step 10, 11, and 12, and that is life-changing stuff. And I'm seeing it happen for people at all different lengths of sobriety. I'm working with a guy right now that's got 33 years, that was dying on the vine. I mean, we don't lose everybody to drinking. I talk to people that, they will say, I'm not thinking about drinking, but I can't shake this idea of killing myself. That's untreated alcoholism in the rooms of AA. So to be able to have a message for that guy and to be able to tell that guy there's a level of AA that you've never experienced is a huge message, because I walked around for a long time with no experience of that.
I just wanted to tell one quick story about a sponsee, and they give us a ton of permission to use them. As a matter of fact, when they listen to the CD and they hear us talking about them, they love it, even if it doesn't shine a good light on them. You know what I mean? But this one little gal should be in prison. An absolute train wreck, was sent away from home from basically 12 years old on to boarding schools, just a train wreck of a kid. 22 years old, her mother's in Al-Anon, and she's a black belt Al-Anon, and her mother kept alluding to me that she's in prison, probably going to go to, or in jail, probably going to go to prison, and I'm thinking, man, she is working an amazing program, this Al-Anon mom, she is standing by her guns, and she's not letting this kid cry on the phone, nothing. Well, long story short, she does, as a good Al-Anon would, manage to hook me up with her. You know what I mean? She thought, my kid, if she's got any shot, it's going to be with you, Katie. So I take this little girl under my wing, and I have her do an evening review right out of the gate, what we're getting ready to talk about, where I have we're beating this self-piece in, and she's doing everything every night, her little sleepy time tea, living at mom and dad's at 22, you know how much I love that. And she said, because I told her she'll have problems, I'll say, you have problems because you're living at home at 22. I don't have problems with my mother because I don't live with my mother. And so we're talking, you know what I mean? Jeez,
it's such a
this
hard
is abnormal. So I'm sitting there, and she says to me, she calls me, and she goes, oh my God, my God conscious is getting so clear. I am in touch with selfish and self-centered. Let me tell you what happened. She goes, she's going to fly out to see her grandparents in Iowa to make an amends to her grandmother because her grandmother's very, very sick. Now, she's 45 days sober, getting ready to get on a plane and make these amends. Pretty impressive, yes? Willing to go to any length. This is serious. We're talking serious stuff. And her parents say, we'll go ahead and figure out, Dad just lost his job, but they seem to have money somewhere. And so Dad's going to figure out how to get this money together for her, right? So that she can go get this ticket, because this is important, because Grandma's probably not going to make it. And she said while she's sitting there watching her parents decide about this trip, she's thinking about this really cute luggage that she'd seen in a catalog, that she'd hoped that they'll buy her this luggage. And she goes, that's the selfish piece you're talking about, isn't it? I go, oh my God, your dad's lost his job. Mom and Dad are trying to come up with the cash to send your sorry butt to go visit the grandparents, and you want to figure out how to, connive that luggage. Maybe I could get that. And she said, and it's at Victoria's Secret. I go, they make luggage? I mean, what kind of luggage is at Victoria's Secret, for God's sake? So the next time I see her, the next time I see her, she pulls it up on her phone because she's 22, right? She goes, this is the luggage. And but what was so cool is she goes, oh my God, that's the self-centered piece you're talking about. She said, my first thought was, gosh, how can I get that luggage out of them right now? They seem pretty vulnerable. See, that's what somebody at 45 days sober, when they're seeing that self piece, you got a light, and I go back to that every time. Remember that luggage. When I'm trying to get her to see something else.
I'm working with a guy that's got 25 years, and he came to me struggling. He's ready to leave his wife, has all this stuff. And boy, when we took it into, your role in it and that sort of thing, they are crazy about each other. They're praying together. They're doing all this stuff. And
I'm telling you, it's male menopause. I'm trying to explain
even my daughter makes fun of me. I mean, we'll listen to opera music, and she'll look over at me and go, like that, and I'm like, oh, shut up. You shut up.
Testosterone turns to estrogen. What can I say?
Yeah, I'm nocturnal. That's it. I'm marsupial. But to be able to take this stuff from a completely different angle, and to be able to see that stuff. But the thing about it is, I can't believe I actually called this one back up.
Good for you.
We had the talk in the third step talk, hour and a half in my office, where I'm laying out the deal. I'm laying out, on the first requirement, that any life run on self-will that can hardly be a success. On that basis, the whole thing, the deal, stay close to Him, perform His work well, quit playing God. We lay the whole thing out. We do the third step prayer, but then like weeks later, we talked about something, we had another talk about it, and then he came to the meeting at the house when we were doing the third step, and he called me on the way home that night. This is a guy with 25 years of sobriety that I've been working with for a few weeks. And he goes, I finally got it. Tonight, that vodka's not my problem. My problem is selfishness and self-centeredness, and that if I get blocked enough from that stuff, the only thing I've ever found that will ease that pain is that I drink vodka. And I'm like, that's it. But the other thing is, we blow our worlds up in the meantime. Between the reemergence of self and that first drink, we blow the world up. And that's why Katie's saying, in that condition, you can spot the alcoholic from 100 miles. We were in the airport the other day, and she goes, there's an alcoholic in the bar, and you look over, and here's this guy with this brand new Harley jacket, just... If he was any greener, he'd grow a foot if you stuck him in the ground, but he's all Mr. Harley guy, and he's loud and, and we're like, oh, I think that's one of us, that's the guy, in the post office, in the grocery store, we're the one that's going, oh, come on, you got 18 registers here, and, you see how that, when you become, the thing I can tell you about self, though, is when you first start working on self, it is incredibly obvious in others. I am blind to it in myself. I can spot it in you. I go, oh, now that's that self-centeredness we were talking about. Or did you see that guy? But then, and like with Sam, one time, our son, I go, I wanted to tell a story. It's actually her son, so she's a little protective. And, if you call suckling him to her breast at 22 years old...
Oh, that is not true. So not true.
She's a little protective of this guy. But it's a beautiful, a little example of self-centeredness. And I told the story about Sam, because if you want to see self-will run, at least an extreme example of self-will... 17-year-old boy is perfect, I mean, and so we were talking about, so one time I was telling about it, there had been a fire, and I had to charge into the fire and put the fire out, and I saved the house from burning and all this stuff, and, it was a very dramatic story, and I had literally just driven from the fire to meet them for dinner, and I'm not a fireman, I mean, and I'm telling him this whole story, and when I finished telling the story, he goes, "This is getting really big." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "This bump on my chin." And I'm like, "Oh my God, could you be any more self-centered? I just talked about coming out." Well, Katie, she goes, "So that's the story you told him at the treatment center today, talking about self-centeredness? You didn't want to tell him about the red pickup truck story?" And I was like, "No, I didn't want to tell the red pickup truck story, because that makes me look self-centered, because in untreated alcoholism, when Katie's husband was he's having his brain tumor removed the next day, and it was literally the size of an orange in his head. That seam in the middle of his brain was pushed over right above his ear, and his tumor was literally as big as an orange in his head. And he's going in the next day for them to take a hinge out of his skull and scoop this. And I had gotten a new pickup truck that day, and I insisted that Katie come down from the hospital room to the parking lot to look at my new red pickup truck. I mean, and I didn't know I was doing anything wrong. That's when we talk about being driven by self. That's how selfish I am as a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. There's an example I tell of one time I walked into the Northland Club, this big AA club in our hometown. And I walked back into the card room, and this guy is sitting there, and he goes, "Hey, Charlie, how you doing?" He goes, "Man, we need to go back out to Vegas sometime." And I was like, yeah. I turned away. I was horrified. I was like, oh, my God, I have zero recollection of ever being in Vegas with this guy. And I had to think about it and think about it and think about it. And one time there was a group of 4 of us that had gone out to Vegas. Now, with this new awareness of self, I realized what had happened. I wasn't in Vegas with this guy. I was in Vegas with me. And I got me on me like this, and all I'm thinking about is me, wherever I go. And this guy just happened to be along. So it's no wonder that I didn't have any clear memory of him being, because I was obsessed with me the whole time. My experience, what's going on with me, how's this affected me? It's like, it's all over me. But we got to be able to bring this awareness to a new guy, because when a guy comes to me, Heidi and I were talking during the break, I got to have a sponsor that is going to take me to that 4th column efficiently and go, "This is your delusion, this is your dishonesty, this is how you're looking at it wrong. Are you willing to look at it from an entirely different angle?" And I love the fact that she was able to admit, she's like, no, there's, because in my mind I'm thinking, there is no other angle. It would be stupid to look at it from another angle, because I've clearly got the right take on this thing. Anybody that's looking at it from another angle is way off. And that's why we talk about, Eckhart Tolle talks about being able to observe the thinker and watch myself think. Just being able to watch myself think is a level of consciousness that a lot of us have never experienced before. And Katie's worked with me on that a lot of times, where she'll go, "Look what happens, watch what happens." It's like I've got this observer watching Charlie operate sometimes, and it'll go, "Look what happens when Charlie gets scared. Look what happens when Charlie thinks he's about to lose a bunch of money." When we talk about being driven by fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, look what happens when Charlie feels shame. I'll kill both of us if there is a certain tone. There was an art dealer that I'd taken a collection of art to sell, and she called me. She goes, "I've been trying to get in touch with you," and I go, "That is bull. Nobody tries to get in touch with me. I got a manager. I got an answering machine. I got a cell phone. I mean, you don't try to get in touch with me. I'm as accessible." And she goes, "Charlie." And then I said something else. She goes, "Charlie." And every sentence starts off with this, "Charlie." And about the 4th time I go, "You say my name like that one more time, and I swear to God." And before it was gone, I had to send a sponsee over to pick up the artwork, because, and I was going, wow, just that shaming tone will trigger a reaction in me that I had no idea was driving me. And I guarantee you that you talk about old ideas, that goes back to I don't know what. But being able to watch myself think and observe that level of self-centeredness and what happens when I do this thing. You talk about being able to look at this stuff from an entirely different angle. We could spend a whole lot of time on this, but I wanted to get to, in this last session, we're not going to talk much about step 12 today. I promise you one thing. We're going to talk about step 11. And when you get somebody through this work and have that experience, and you don't have to press that guy into service work. You don't have to press that guy into carrying this message. You can't stop that guy from carrying this message.
Yeah, we were talking. Chris Schroeder said, I said, he goes, well, what topic would you guys do when you come back? And I said, well, we haven't talked to Bonnie, and, I know this is a real honor to be asked to be at the Wilson House. It's not something that you tell them you want to do. And Bonnie said, oh, no, you're definitely coming back. And so we were talking about maybe the next time it could be on sponsorship, that we could do a weekend on sponsorship and what that looks like. Because I think it was one of the most humbling things for me to say is I don't know how to do it. I absolutely do not know how to take the new guy through. I swear today, if you got 10 minutes sober, if you're still drinking, I'm your girl. I can do it. I can do it. I can sponsor you without any doubt that God has got my back completely with you, right? And given the right things to say. One of the things I want to say is what I do a lot of is I sit in meetings. It's a little challenging for me to sit in open discussion meetings today, I will admit. JJ and I share the same feeling here. If I start hearing people getting off into, $1 an hour therapy, how's my day? The pool boy put too much chlorine in my pool. It makes me a little crazy because I go back to the fact that, we're talking about a fatal illness here. We're talking about people are dying of untreated alcoholism. People are dying of active alcoholism. I don't care about your pool boy, and that's really dangerous. It's a tough spot for me to get. But so what I look for is the person that's hurting in the meeting, the one that's not laughing, right? You see a lot of people, everybody's laughing. Just look around for the person who's not laughing, man, and make a beeline over there to them. Say, how you doing? And just start talking to them and immediately go right to the steps. I don't really want to talk about your problem. I want to just say, how you doing? They'll give you a brief deal, and then you go into the level of step work and where they're at and what have you. One of the things that made me crazy, and like I said, I called it slogan slinging. It's not knocking the slogans, but I think it's a disservice to the individual. When somebody is driven, we're not choosing to act that way, right? Are we all in agreement? You get me in untreated alcoholism, and I can do some pretty crazy stuff. And so when it says love and tolerance is our code, it's a promise. Don't forget, if a mere code of morals or better philosophy of life were sufficient to bring about the recovery behind alcoholism, we would have done it before. Self-help, throwing something at me. Say you're sitting there talking trash about somebody, and somebody goes, love and tolerance is our code. Well, you've already touched my shame, man. I mean, I'm not digging that statement at all. First of all, I shouldn't have been talking about the person anyway. But instead, what I'd rather have somebody say is, what's going on? Let's do a little mini inventory on what that might look like. Give me a second column and help the person, right? That's my job, is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Don't throw out a promise to me. I can't get to a promise. I can't even see a promise. I'm not kidding you. When Joe was in the hospital, and they basically think that this is a malignant tumor, right? And this has not got a good ending. And so Charlie has bought this new pickup truck. And he's my best friend. He's like my brother. And at that point, I remember standing in that elevator just in tears thinking, back off with your stupid truck. I don't give a shit about your truck. And I swear he is sitting there just going, come on. And he's doing that teasing thing, And I'm thinking about how I can kill him.
It was a nice truck.
And but I swear, and you know what? He did not see that for years until he was saying something about my son's self-centeredness. And I have a very bad tendency to do this. How many of y'all, when you were kids, know what this means? Back at you. Back at you, man. You got to be raising.
She's like Wonder Woman.
And I swear, the minute he brings me something, I'm like, back at you, man. Let me remind you of the time.
You mean like the time that you did? And I'm going,
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. But okay, so now I just want to mention, so remember, when somebody lobs out a promise at you, that's really not a good benefit. because I can't achieve a promise. You know, that's like talking to the overweight person and they're saying, man, I walked up those stairs and I was really struggling. Go, well, if you'd lose 40 pounds, no kidding. Would that really help me? Duh. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like, don't state the obvious. I'm not even there yet. Help me see what's going on with me. I'm blinded to my own level of self-centeredness. Well, one of the things I want to tell you guys is, Charlie can do the evening review, but I want to talk about that positive prayer. I don't know if anybody had a moving moment at that time in that positive prayer, but one of the things that Mark taught me, one of the things that a spiritual mentor that I like in AA taught me is spiritual law. Spiritual law is for everything. It's for Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity. It's all of them out there. So it's not that I'm quoting Christianity here. I think that's real important to understand. But the deal is when you begin to understand spiritual law, it's like the law of gravity, the law of electricity. When you understand it, you know that you can't jump off a building, period, because you respect the law of gravity. Well, the law of nature is, you know that a plant needs water to live, right? But you can overwater a plant and kill it. So the problem is not water, it's understanding the law. Correct?
And that spiritual law is constant. They can't suspend the law of gravity because somebody really important fell off the roof, or we'd be in chaos. You know, so it's not like a lot of the stuff that I've been blaming the power for is stuff that's just happened out of spiritual law and that sort of thing.
And I don't really believe that, you know, like people, you'll hear people say, oh, be careful if you pray for patience, God will throw a flat tire your way. That is not at all the loving God. As a matter of fact, you're just asking for God to make you aware of where you're not patient. And He says, really? You really ready to be woke up for that? Yeah. Okay, here it is. And you see it everywhere. That's like when you discover, you're like, oh, okay, hold up. Maybe I don't want to see that. You asked me. The only way to give something to God is you've got to be aware of it. Period. You can't give Him something you don't know you don't have. Right? And so under these spiritual laws, it's the law of cause and effect. And it's all throughout our book. All the spiritual laws are throughout our book. But the law of cause and effect is, say you got financial problems, but you got to buy those shoes. Right? Whose fault is that? It's mine, right? I got to have those shoes. I got to have the new set of golf clubs. But I got these financial, because I'm not willing to go without in order to get out of the financial situation. Cause and effect. Cause and effect. I know that this particular relationship's probably not good for me. I mean, he doesn't have a car or a job, but I really like him. You know what I mean? Are you with me? Then you get with him and you go, yeah, and he doesn't have a car or a job. Well, we saw that happening, cause and effect, right? And so the law of cause and effect and the law of substitution is what you put out, you get back. So if you put out that you're never going to have a good job, that you're never going to have a relationship, that you're never going to be a good member of AA, that you're never going to be able to sponsor, that you're never going to be able to lose weight, whatever. Our normal dialogue is quite negative, especially in the alcoholic. It's quite negative. And you're not even aware it is until you ask God to wake you up to how negative you are, right?
So where positive prayer comes in handy is it's different from anything I've ever done, because instead of saying, God, don't let this happen or something, it's putting something in its place. Like after her working with me on this stuff, like if I'm getting ready to give a talk or something, where used to I would have said, God, don't let me mess this up, or something like that. Now it's like, God, we're going to have a good time here tonight. Your message is going to be delivered through us, and we're all going to enjoy this, and I want to thank you for that. My daughter is healthy and happy and has found a job that she likes and is spiritually connected, and I want to thank you for that. It's like acknowledging this stuff, but you got to tell the story about going to see Mark before you do.
Oh, okay. So once again, I love my sponsor. I love the woman-to-woman thing, and Mark, I just love to ask Mark questions, but Mark never took me through the work or never sponsored me and all that stuff. And I was having a problem with this woman. I'm self-employed, but I own a franchise. And in this franchise, you got to follow certain rules. And I don't know about you guys. I don't like rules. I don't like to follow them. I don't like rules, right? And so I always make it look to where I don't have to necessarily follow the rules because I'm special. So this woman, they
no
have,
sense of entitlement there.
yeah, they come and check on you once a year, and I've been doing this for a bazillion years, which makes me really not have to follow the rules. Are you with me on that? And so, but every time they come, they always mark me off in several areas where I'm not following the rules, but now they've made it so difficult that they can fail me and pull my franchise. Well, that is a threat. You're threatening my money. We were talking about it. You threaten my money, and I go crazy. And so I'm really struggling. This woman's coming. She doesn't like me. This is not good. It's a surprise attack visit. They don't ever tell you when they're coming. I am losing my mind. And Charlie goes, Katie, you need to go talk to Mark about this. And I thought, I don't want to talk to Mark about this. And then he goes, go talk to him. He understands this kind of stuff pretty well. So I said, okay, so I got to drive 45 minutes. And I call him, and he says, come on out. And he's only got a window, and he comes outside. He was a heavy smoker, and he ends up smoking, 9 cigarettes in the middle of this meeting. And I tell him the deal, and I know it's in a nutshell, and I know how to condense a story pretty quickly. And he says, he says, I want you to do something. He says, I want you to pray 3 minutes in the morning and 3 minutes at night about y'all's relationship, you and this woman. And I want it to be about that your grandkids enjoy playing with each other, and because he knew that this woman and I had some pretty good history. And I'm listening to him tell me this, and I'm thinking, okay. It's Mark. I love Mark. I'll do whatever Mark asks me to do. And I get in the car and I swear, I go, oh, that is the stupidest, most hokiest crap I have ever heard. I drove 45 minutes to listen to that. Did he not hear? I got big problems. 3 minutes in the morning, 3 minutes, whatever. But it's Mark, and I listen to Charlie, so it's all Charlie's fault anyway. And whatever, I'll do it, So, and Charlie goes, so how'd it go? And it's like, it's stupid, man. You're not going to believe what he told me to do. It's stupid. But I told him I'd do it, and I know he's going to ask me. We see him every week, and so blah. Well, that was, 6 years ago? 6 years ago, I started this process. It has not only revolutionized my life, made my prayer time remarkable, brought me closer to my Creator. I shared it with people that have... countless times shared stories with me, hundreds of times, with how remarkable this is. It is a spiritual law. All I'm doing is passing on a spiritual law to you that was passed on to me, and I thought it was stupid. And I can't tell you how many things in AA I thought are stupid. How many of y'all agree? I mean, stupid. You want me to do what? Oh, sure.
That's not going to work.
Yeah. And so what turned from 3 minutes has now turned into 20 minutes. I don't miss a day doing it. If I have missed a day, I'll stop in my day just to do my positive prayer. I've nicknamed it positive prayer. But so we did this in Atlanta, and we did just what we did with you guys. I suggested it. They did what they did. I don't know whose heart it touches, who thinks it's hokey. I don't know. This girl comes up to me afterwards. She's crying. She says, I was moved in that a 3-minute meditation. And she said, I have an estranged son. And once again, when you tell me a pretty touching story, I remember, man, I can get in touch with your pain pretty quick. And I thought, that is pretty cool. And she says, I'm going to do this. 1 year later, this is the email she sent me, and she gave me permission to read it. Now, I hadn't heard from her. It wasn't like she was staying in touch with me. This is 1 year later, but I remember her. She says, Katie, I can't begin to tell you what an impact your experience, strength, and hope has made on me. We talked about the power of positive affirmation prayer. I shared with you my situation with my youngest son. These boys, man, they touch me just like the girls touch you men. It says, that has been estranged from our family. I took your suggestion and prayed each and every night and every morning. This past New Year's Eve, I had my entire family, my 2 sons, my 2 daughter-in-laws, and my 3 grandchildren and my husband, at my dinner table together for a family dinner. This was my exact prayer along with the positive affirmations. I visualized this scene in my head for more than 1 year. The event that led up to this were all God-placed and centered in love. I used this counsel of others and let God take over. We are now a family again, and my husband, granddaughters, and myself are going to Tucson in April for a visit. We were invited. Yes, there is still work to do, but the door has been opened. And this is a woman who was estranged. You don't use the term estranged from your son if you hadn't seen him in 3 months. She was estranged from this young man. There was no contact whatsoever. This is the power of prayer. This is the power of understanding spiritual law. Now remember though, what it says on page 19, and I think this is very, very important line. And it says, is it 19 or 14? I'm sorry, it's...
Which one?
I got it. The bottom of page 14 and the top of page 15, where it says faith without work is dead. And it says, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life, I for the longest time put a period there and thought that meant go back to church. I thought that meant understand, figure out who this God is, right? How many of y'all have tried to figure God out? Searching for God, right? And trying, if I learn more about this God, then I'll get this deal. And it says, for if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead.
Wait, I thought this was a selfish program.
So what he's saying is, God's going to work through you to get to me. That's how this deal works. Is prayer and meditation important? You bet. It's crucial. But for you to enlarge your spiritual life is through the work and self-sacrifice for others. You start working with a ton of people. So many people don't sponsor it. It really blows me away. It is all what this book is about, is sponsorship. It's not optional. I don't care if you don't think you're good. That's an excuse. It's a lazy excuse. And the truth of the matter is you're not going to grow. It's like you're walking around kicking a gift until that gift is tattered and torn at your feet and you never open the box. And inside that box is this incredible gift of sponsorship to where you're getting ready to grow like you wouldn't believe. Is prayer and meditation important? You bet it is. But I guarantee with the spiritual work that we're talking about comes through much more than just that. It's an important part. But I had it all mixed up. I thought it was all going to be through spiritual teaching is how I was going to get this deal. I didn't realize it's active, not passive. And then let's see, honey, did you want to talk about the evening review?
I'm going to go a little bit. We're not going to get as technical about some of this stuff as we normally do because, I don't know, we're talking a little bit more about experience, but I do want to say that Mark was big on the disciplines of 10, 11, or 12. And we talk about Mark a lot because we loved Mark and he changed our lives. But it wasn't the power of Mark, and Mark was the first one to say that. It was just that he was the guy that was engaged in this work deeper than anybody I'd ever been around before. But I do recommend seeing if you can get your hands on some CDs by him or something because, it'll blow your mind. He had a level of clarity where the first time we were around him, we were like, my God, man, what book are you reading? You got some Mark stuff back there? We're not sucking up to the tapers when I tell you that listening to CDs changed my life. Mm-hmm. I love listening to CDs, and you pick up pieces, and sometimes, like Katie was saying yesterday, we were at this Big Book Experience in Austin with Bob D. and Chris S., who was here last night, and then I'll be listening to the CD, and I'll get a huge piece, like one of the things I said yesterday about that thing about we feel fear ought to be classed with stealing. I heard that listening to some CDs one time, and I was like, I was sitting there when he said that, and I didn't hear it. You know how we were talking about how your ego will make you check out, or my ego will say, on the CD they can't see me motioning at you, Scott. But you know how sometimes I'll be sitting in a meeting and all of a sudden it's like I am propelled from my seat. It's like. Why am I going to the bathroom when I don't even really need to go to the bathroom? It's because my ego said, get up, get out, get out, get out. They're getting way too close. Run for the nearest exit. Don't listen to this. Because they're getting way too close to what I don't want to hear. And it's funny, it's interesting to watch that stuff happen. But Mark, when we first went to that deal, he was talking about the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12, and living in the strict disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. And when I practiced the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12, and the disciplines, and the disciplines, and the disciplines, and the disciplines, and you're like, oh, for God's sake, shut up, because I wasn't dipping a toe in the disciplines of steps 10, 11, and 12. And he talked about the strict disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. Had no idea what we were missing. Jesus. I mean, when he would talk about discipline is the horse that I ride, he was like a monk. I mean, I was always afraid that he was going to go off and join a monastery somewhere because he was drawn to that monastic environment. He liked to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and do his stuff. And, he was drawn a little towards some of the Eastern stuff. But, I mean, it was every day, and he was in that stuff, and he was in those meditations, and he was in those disciplines, and he would talk about the line and turning back to the line as we go through the day, turning back to this line, and watching ourselves and constant thought of others, and he would bring out some of the stuff where he'd go, how about this for a topic for a meeting? On page 85, it says, much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from him who has all knowledge and power. Here's the line. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of his Spirit into us. He's like, how come we never use that for a topic for a meeting? It's like, let's talk about traffic today. It's like, how about if we've carefully followed direction, we've begun to sense the flow of God's Spirit into us. It says in here, to some extent, we have become God conscious. I was talking about how as I study this book, and I study this book a lot, I start seeing words that are recurring, and basis was one, basis and basically and all that stuff that we talk. Keep an eye out for that one. It's amazing how many times it's given me a basic solution. The other one is conscious and consciousness. The book is not trying to move me towards a faith in God or a knowledge of God or even a belief in God. What it's trying to move me towards is a consciousness of God. When it talks about God consciousness, it's talking about being conscious of this power. It's not God in a box somewhere. It's not God as this pinch hitter that I call in, when we need a designated hitter, for a big deal or something like that. It's a consciousness of God where it's actually part of my walking around, part of my thinking. I'm really bringing it into my thoughts, and that's what, and there were places in the book where I was sure it said things differently for a long time. One of them was back in We Agnostics, where it said, when many hundreds of people are able to say that the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives. This is on page 51. They present a powerful argument why we should have faith. I was sure that what it was said. I did the set-aside prayer one day, and I read that page, and it says, when many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful. You see how they're saying it's not the presence of God that's the most important fact in their lives today. It's the consciousness of the presence of this power. It's where it's really something that's part of my deal, part of my walking around. It's part of my decision-making process. When I get scared, I go to God. Katie's talking about going to prayer. Being in that consciousness is, when the book talks about an entire psychic change, a personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism, spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening, change of heart, this is it. That's what it's talking about. If, as a result of this work, if we have carefully followed directions, we've begun to sense the flow of God's power into us.
And I think a lot of times, too, that the line that says God's doing for us what we couldn't do for ourselves is very misunderstood. That's what it's talking about, is that level of compassion that I can have for someone is God's doing for me what I can't muster that up. That's not of my nature. It's not when I lose a job or get fired and somebody goes, well, God's doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. I've been trying to get out of that job forever. It's like, no, you got fired because you're self-centered, and you didn't show up to work. It's self-centered. It's God's doing for us what we can't do for ourselves, is that level of God that that presence.
But remember over in step 3, when we were talking about that my only shot is this power, right? And then on my own power, I'm going to be in constant collision with somebody. And it's saying that we've got to have this new power. But it said, that this decision in step 3 could have little permanent effect unless it once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things that are blocking me. Well, see, now we're over in this unblocked condition. We've carefully followed directions, and over here, remember the pipeline that we had? Well, now that pipeline is unblocked a little bit. We removed enough of what's blocking me to have a contact with this power. And it's, it's saying we have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. But we must go further, and that means more action. Then it rolls into step 11, says yes, prayer and meditation. The thing about it, with step 11, I love it when I hear people in meetings, even with Katie, when people say, "Oh, I'm not good at meditation," and you're like, well, of course you're not good at meditation. Were you pretty good at writing inventory when you got to this program? I mean, some of this stuff we learn how to do it, but I mean, we have to develop this stuff, and it says it works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. And then it goes on to the evening review, and see. I just want to touch on the evening review because it's very interesting. You remember, how many of y'all did that evening review sheet last night? Cool. Yeah, that's good stuff, And did you notice any similarities between what we wrote on that and what we covered in the 10th step? Look at what it says. Remember what it said in the 10th step? I'm going to watch for selfishness, resentment, dishonesty, and fear. And it's going to give me 4 things to do about it. Ask God to remove it. Talk to somebody else about it. Make amends if I need to. Turn my attention to somebody I can help. Now listen to the evening review. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Was I resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? And what about the 4 things I was supposed to have done about it? Do I owe an apology? Have I kept something to myself which I should have discussed with another person at once? Was I kind and loving towards all? What could I have done better? See, the evening review is almost like at the end of the day going, how'd you do on your 10th step today? As you're going through the day today, how'd you do? Were you doing this stuff? I swear to God, I called all my sponsees one day at the Common Solution meeting. That's what we call the meeting at my house. And I was like, you guys must just be amazing, because none of you guys have experienced selfishness, resentment, dishonesty, or fear in the last 2 weeks. Either that or you're talking to somebody else about it, and they all kind of hang their head and they're like, we're not talking to anybody else about it. It's because we fall out of this stuff, and so this is keeping me on the path. I've begun to sense the flow of the Spirit into me. This is going to keep me in it. And what if we actually did this? I love that line that Chris talks about where he says, what if we actually continue to take personal inventory? Not just approved of it in theory, I support the 10th step, but I think we should keep it. I don't personally involve myself in it, but I wouldn't mind taking the meeting hostage for the next 7 minutes to talk about what I think it would be like were I to ever do the 10th step. We're talking about actually doing it, right? When we do this evening review, but the difference between 10 and 11, and the evening review in 11 is that we bring God into it. What could I have done? Was I thinking of myself most of the time, or was I thinking of what I could do for others? Was I out of self, or were we dealing with the reemergence of self? But we're careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection. Why? Because that would make me upset, make Charlie feel bad? It says no, because it would diminish my usefulness to others.
When we're in those 3 things, let me tell you, somebody can come up and tell you that they're dying of cancer, and I have got no compassion. I may act like someone who is, but if I'm in the midst of morbid reflection, it's just another form of self-pity. How many of you guys have been in knee-deep self-pity, and somebody comes to you with a heartbreaking story, and all I can think of is, oh, great timing. I'm supposed to be really thoughtful. Mm-hmm. Great. We're
not going to have time to go through the step 11 technically, but here's what I want you to try to do. We've talked about step 10 a lot. If you're in an inventory, and when you get to this, try going through the day and really watching for those 4 things and really doing those 4 things it says to do about it. Actually picking up the phone and calling my sponsor or somebody that I've given spiritual consent to and say, you know what, I get calls all the time from my sponsees, even texts where they'll text me and say, you got time for a quick 10th step call? I'm feeling a little selfishness, or I'm feeling a little fear, and I'll call them and they'll go, I'm scared about my money. I got to have a crown put on, and I'm already tight on money or something, and we'll talk about that. Those are 10th step calls, as we go through the day. And then the most amazing thing that came out of us going to that workshop with Mark was when we went home, we started actually getting up in the morning, sitting down next to the bed and doing the instructions on pages 86, 87, and 88. Actually picking the book up and looking at it and going, let's see, on awakening, do we have any clear-cut directions here? Let us think about the day ahead. We consider our plans for the day. We ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from 3 things: self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives.
Now, one quick thing behind that is, you see where it's telling you to think about your day? That's actually a good thing. It's important to sit and think about your day and think about, today, like when the 2 lines ahead it says, in our evening review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. Say you're real snippy to your significant other the day before, and you're just kind of making them the battlegrounds. So when you're thinking about your day, go, you know what, today I want to be aware that I'm not doing that I'm not falling into that trap again, or that person at work, or whatever. You're actually running through your day to think about it's kind of like Bob said, it's like the guy who's going to war. He's checking to be sure the cannons are good.
A general meditates his his battle.
He thinks about what that battle's going to look like. And that's what we're to do. We're to think about our day. Instead of that whole clear the mind thing.
Listen to what this 1936 dictionary says as the definition for meditate. Meditate. Get these glasses tuned in here. To muse or ponder. To think abstractedly, to think upon, design, or purpose. Meditation, the act of meditating, deep thought. So see, they're talking about deep thought, to focus our thoughts on this stuff. Now, are we saying that Eastern meditation is bad? Absolutely not. But and I can do that along with this stuff, but what this is telling me to meditate is my day. This deep thought about God. When I wake up in the morning, I'll follow these directions. God, when upon awakening, okay, think about our day. Okay, what I got going on today. We ask God to direct our thinking. God, please direct my thinking today. And then it says, we ask Him to take away self-pity, dishonest, self-seeking motives. This is laying on my back in the bed. And then it says, especially asking to be, under these conditions, we can employ our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. That kind of speaks to those people that, in the meetings are going, well, my brain's like a bad neighborhood. I shouldn't go there myself. It's like, well, if you clean it up in the step process, it's going to be okay to go in there. It's saying, God, if we clear our thinking of wrong motives, when we get this God consciousness going, it's not a bad neighborhood anymore. And here's an amazing line to me. It says, our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. Heidi and I were talking about this during the break. That term, thought life, blew my mind because my whole life as a type A, thinking type of person, my thought life was the entire reality of the universe. What I think is reality. When I'm thinking it, it feels like fact, and it's the only take that there possibly is. So when you say, are you willing to look at it from an entirely different angle, I'm like, why? I got it, But to be able to observe my thought life and be able to see my thought life being able to place, or sometimes we go, oh, Charlie, you looks like you might be driven by fear here. Your thought life, the fabric of your existence might be a little off here, and I look back at times, I have to go, oh, I better watch it, and I can see my thought life being pushed around by these things where it says driven by 100 forms, and I can really see it when I take some stuff to Katie, or I take stuff, my take can be way off sometimes, but actually being involved in this process, there's a line where they said meditation, self-examination, and prayer. Those are all 3 wonderful practices: meditation, self-examination, and prayer. But it says if practiced together, they create an unshakable foundation for life. Self-examination, meditation, and prayer. We're talking about living on a completely different basis here. So we roll into that, and then what's amazing, and I want to spin through this because it talks about we ask God for direction, We relax and take it easy. If we're confused about something, read this stuff on your own. And I mean, it really works to get up in the morning and just open the book and do page 86, 87, and 88. And then it says, and then think about 84 and 85 during the day. But then when you get over here and it talks about this and that, and then it says our thinking will be placed on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. We've been given intuitive thought now. The book has started to tell me that I'll be able to rely on intuitive thought helping me in a situation. Sometimes going into a big job interview or a meeting, I can go, God, you're going to have to carry me through this one, and I can rely on that He's going to give me the thoughts, give me the right things to say. And after a while, it says we come to rely upon it. But then that next line says we usually conclude the period of meditation. There was never a point in there where I assumed a lotus position and did ohms and that sort of thing. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but they're saying that what we just did was the period of meditation that they used to practice. It was sitting and thinking about the day and getting God-centered and bringing God into this stuff. So this is amazing stuff. And then down in here, there's a thing I call PARS, P-A-R-S. It says as we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful. And you hear that in meetings all the time. People go, well, it says in there, pause when agitated or doubtful. And they stop right there. Like I'm supposed to just pause when agitated. Well, let me tell you.
Well, they usually just say pause when agitated.
If I'm blocked, pause ain't coming. Does that make sense?
It's a crapshoot.
Danny Brown called me one day and he goes, Charlie, I usually know when I'm agitated, but I'm almost never doubtful. And that's that thing we were talking about earlier where it's like, I'm sure that my take is the only take there is. But it gives me 4 instructions here. In step 11, it also has some instructions about going through the day. Not just in the 10th step, but in the 11th step. It says as we go through the day, and I've made an acronym out of it that I call PARS. So I'm in the golf business, so PARS is pause when agitated or doubtful. Ask for the right thought or action. This is one of those little hub lines back to the deal we made in step 3. Constantly remind ourselves we're no longer running the show. Doesn't that sound like the deal we made in step 3? That I'm out of the God business, I'm no longer in management. Saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will, not mine, be done. I tell my sponsees, let's just shoot for a couple of times each day. Saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will, not mine, be done, might be a tall order. It's like, just say it once tomorrow and let me know how it goes. But see how that acronym works? Pause when agitated or doubtful. Ask for the right thought or action. Remind ourselves we're no longer running the show. Saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will, not mine, be done. It reminds me of this deal I made in step 3 where I'm like, I ain't running this deal anymore, and a lot of the reason I'm agitated or doubtful is because I kind of started thinking I was running things again there for a minute, sorry, I kind of hopped up into the management chair there for a minute, and so see how it's watching for the reemergence of self? So that's what we do. And then it goes over there and it says, it gives the 11 step promises, and I love this, that 1 sentence paragraph, it says, it works. It really does. Right? Remember back on page 62, why are we going to quit playing God? It didn't work. Yeah. If you're running things that's going great, rock on, But if you're hitting the wall like I always did, try this stuff. And it says over here, it works. It really does. We're not blowing smoke here, it really, really works. And then it goes into the chapter on working with others.
Hold on one second.
I think we're going to have to just try to finish up this last...
We still have 10 minutes.
10 minutes with general stuff and...
Well, I wanted to bring out a couple of points on this. On the top of page 86, 2 lines down, it says the proper attitude and work at it. I always walked across that word attitude. If you guys... Are you all in the front row are not flipping your books over? They're sitting here going, they're waiting for Charlie to go, are you going to shut her down? Shut her down. God dang it. Okay. Open your doggone book up. We got 10 minutes.
I can talk her into doing whatever she wants to do.
Okay, so you got... So it's 2 lines. It says the proper attitude. You might want to put page 55. And that proper attitude is on page 55. I always thought, I got a good attitude, right? And that's what I thought it meant. Second line down on page 86 says the word attitude. And page 55, 2 paragraphs from the bottom, it says, we can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, remember prejudgment, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself, then if you wish to, you can join us on this broad highway. With this attitude, you cannot fail. So that's the attitude, not just a good attitude, right? And then the other thing I wanted to point out is, at the bottom of page 86, when it says, when thinking about your day, you may face indecision. Absolutely, we face indecision. When you're sitting there and you're thinking, gosh, I'm kind of nervous, I'm going to see so-and-so, or, they're going to do this evaluation at work or whatever. It tells you right here that you ask God for inspiration, intuitive thought, or decision, and then you relax and take it easy. One of the most important things God wants us to do is to stop thinking about it. And what we do is worry. And people think that worry is actually a good thing. And worry, I completely miss my day. Mm-hmm. Now flip over here to page 88, 2 lines down. It says, when you do the pars that Charlie was saying to do, it says, we are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. And then listen to what happens. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily, for we're not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. That level of anxiety, how many of y'all hear people say, oh, I'm just so anxious. I think I even have an anxiety disorder. Oh, of course you do. It's because you're sitting there without any step work. You're always going to be anxious.
Running the whole world will make you anxious.
Absolutely. And the truth is that we're supposed to be doing nothing, really. Leaning back and just keep your mouth shut. And here's a couple of things that I want to give you to think about. In our house, we have what's called a do-over. You're talking about 2 hard-headed alcoholics, right? And remember when you were a kid and everything went wrong and somebody's yelling new rule or do-over or you're not the boss of me and, all of those things. Well, I can do that at 53 years old. It's different language, right? And so Charlie and I do what's called the do-over. And so all of a sudden, especially if you're in a relationship, it can go to hell in a handbasket in 3 seconds, can't it? You can just be loving on each other and then you're ready to kill each other, right? It just went bad quick. And he'll come in or I'll come in and he'll say, can we just do a do-over? And I'm like, I'm game for a do-over. And he'll walk back through the house and he'll pretend like he's just coming in. And it's like, hey, how was your day? And, because we're not going to even talk about it. We're not going to go back. We're not going to rediscuss it. It didn't even work.
It doesn't work all the time.
It does work most of the time, doesn't it? It does work most of the time.
Yeah, but you can't use it every day.
No, you can't. You can't abuse it.
Yeah.
My daughter's husband says, he goes, I'm sick of this do-over thing your family did. He goes, can't we get it right the first time?
Yeah. Well, what we're talking about do-overs is sometimes, I never realized that, talk about manifestations of self, if Katie goes and spends 2.5 hours at the salon getting her hair done and colored and cut and all this stuff, well, when she comes in, I don't want to be showing her Angry Birds or something, it's like, it's expected of me to be able to go, wow, you look great. So like if she spends an hour getting ready for us to go out to dinner, when she goes to the bathroom, you go, oh, you look nice, or something like that. Because otherwise she's like, there's a heavy tax for not saying it, So
heavy tax.
And some of my sponsees will go, well, I don't want to have to do all that. I said, you don't have to do it if you're willing to pay the tax. Because believe me, she's looking for it.
Oh my God! You got about 8 seconds.
Yeah.
I just been in there burning up under a hot blow dryer. I know I look damn good.
So one day she comes in and something happened to her, that just made everything go ugly. I don't remember what it was. And then so I was like, okay, let's do it.
I know what it was if you want to know what it was.
Yeah, I bet she does. She remembers all that stuff. But she gets back in the car and then she opens the door and I go, oh my God, look at your hair. That is amazing, And it's like a whole different household at that point. But that's not my 11th step talk. That's not what I want to close with,
No, and but these are good tips. They're good tips because women.
I tell you what,
like
another good tip that she talked about the God thing. About the God thing that we're talking about. One of the things that I've never really thought about asking my sponsees is, how you sleeping? Because how many people in this room, just with a show of hands, sleep less than 5.5 hours a night or less on a regular basis? It's quite a few hands, and it's a pretty big problem. Because I know for me, if I do 4.5 hours, I'm in an altered state of consciousness. I get a little snappy, and it can affect my day. Well, we're talking about it one day, and we're talking about this positive prayer and stuff like that. She taught me this little mantra one time, and it's important enough that I'm going to say it on the tape. When I would wake up in the morning, if I woke up at 4:45, well, it's just on, because as soon as I'd wake up, it's like, oh, we got this patent lawsuit going on, and we got the thing, and they got the job with the Delaware Solid Waste Authority, and we got this thing going over here, and we got the China berries across the street, and and it's just all in this world. And she taught me this little mantra where I just close my eyes back and I go, God help me, God help me, God help me, God help me. And it's like all of those problems go down and they turn into a little gray spot about 9 inches in front of my eyes. And I'm going, God help me. God help me. And I swear, I can't tell you how many times where after a few minutes I thought, oh, this isn't working. I might as well wake up. And I look at the clock, it's an hour and 20 minutes later. And I've gone back to sleep. And now instead of having 5 hours of sleep, I've had 6.5 or I've had 7. And it's a completely different day. Right? Meditation is the same way. It can greatly affect the way I go through the day. But I'm telling you, I had this talk with a sponsee one time because he was sleeping 2 hours on the couch and then he'd go get in bed with his wife and sleep 2 hours, and the rest of the time he's walking around and he looked like a zombie when he'd come to the meetings and stuff. And we had a little conversation about the mantra one time, and I didn't think anything about it. And a few weeks later we were talking, I go, hey, I never really thought to ask you, did you ever try that mantra? And he goes, dude, I'm sleeping 7 hours a night, every night. I was like, no kidding. Little spiritual tricks like that are amazing. When we pick those things up along the way, I don't know what makes us try them, because there's plenty of times you could have said that well, that's nice for you, but for me, I thought, I'm going to try that, and
it just quiets those voices, because otherwise those voices will take off and you get an emotion with them. That's what we do, right? I mean, the next thing you know, I got dialogue going, I'm pissed. Mm-hmm. I am pissed. So my heart rate's up, my blood pressure's up, and I'm awake. So you're bringing it down to where, for women, I think it helps when we lay our head down, because we don't fall asleep as quick as boys usually do. And so that's where I find for women, if you'll do it at that point, you can have another minute.
If we were going to finish up here, did you hear that sigh? No, it's the thing about it is, you go into one of these weekends thinking, what are we ever going to talk about? For this whole weekend, and then you get up here and there's just not enough time to really get across what you want. But all I can tell you is, on a Sunday morning in East Dorset, Vermont, there's about 45 of us sitting here at the Wilson House talking about actually working a program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't think any of us wound up here by mistake. We didn't make a decision to be here. If you look back on it, but the things I'd like for you to take away from this is the difference between working a program based on not getting loaded, not drinking, or working a program based on reduction of self and increasing God consciousness. If I can remove self, I make room for a little God in there. My battle in sobriety is not, do I drink or not? It's, am I in God consciousness or self consciousness? That's my whole battle throughout the day. Watching it in the 10th step, looking at it in the 11th step evening review, getting tuned up in the morning so I can go out in the world and not act like a maniac, and then, and keeping this stuff going, getting unblocked and staying unblocked, and the message will come out of you, next thing you know, you'll have people coming up to you going, I really like what you said in the meeting, do you have time to get a cup of coffee? And you're like, how come nobody said that to me for 5 years? It's because I wasn't exuding anything, But you have this, I'm telling you, Our book doesn't say this program's pretty cool and then it peters out after about 5 or 10 years. It says the most satisfying years of our existence lie ahead of us. And I believe that more at 25 years than I did at 5 years. I'm telling you, I mean, this book is 500 feet deep. It opens up, like Katie said, spiritual literature, and it'll meet you wherever you are. You know, and all of a sudden, if you go a little deeper, it'll go a little deeper with you. If you go a lot deeper, it'll go a lot deeper with you. But it's staying in the work, staying in the book, and staying in that sort of thing. I love getting around pockets of enthusiasm. I love seeing people that are actually fired up about working an AA program because, you know, people are dying in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they're not dying because they didn't want it. It makes me crazy when I hear them say, you know, oh, he just didn't want it bad enough. You're like, for God's sakes, he was desperate enough that he looked up an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and came to the meeting, and he wasn't offered our common solution. You know, so our job is to be able to get out there and have this experience and be available when the new guy's there. You know, and to be able, I love what Katie said about when somebody cracks a big joke in the meeting and everybody's cracking up. That's your 12-step opportunity right there. Look around that room and find that guy that's sitting over there and he ain't laughing because none of this is funny. This might be my last meeting. You know, I don't know what you guys are laughing about. That's the guy to go over to and go, how's it going, man? Where are you at in the step work? You know, how come you're not doing it? You know, and that sort of thing. And I'm telling you, magic stuff happens.
And I want to just end by saying there was this chick in the meeting crying. And after the meeting, I watched, and once again, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just making observations. She must have had 3 women come over to her and hug her, and you know, I hope you're doing okay. And I looked at her, I said, where are you in the steps? We went outside. She was so ate up with self-pity. The last thing she needed was hugs and that little pat on the back. And man, we sat down, did some step work, and by the time I was done, she said, thank you so much. I needed that. I was drowning in my own stuff. That's what we're talking about here, guys. It has been such a treat. We love coming to the Wilson House. For us, it is magical. And thank you so much for sharing your weekend with us.
I got one thing I'm going to close with here. You heard me talk about it earlier. Listen and see if this has any depth. Page 100 in the big book.
Oh, everybody jumps and gets their book.
Yeah, my man.
Charlie's speaking now.
Check it out.
Look, there it is.
Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. God bless you, and thanks for having us this weekend.
Canadian friends.
Let's go ahead and join hands and close with the Lord's Prayer.
How about the 7th-step prayer?
Let's do the 7th-step prayer.
Nice.
Yeah.
Optional chanting, yes. Dan, you know this one?
I don't think he heard you.
Dan, you know this one? Start us off with my Creator.
My Creator.
My Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, the good and the bad. I pray that you now remove from me
every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen.
All right.
You want to do the Lord's Prayer too? She wants to do